Hello and welcome to the Patty Pod, Season 3, Episode 10. Smorgasbord again. How's everybody doing? I'm sorry it's been a little while. I've been wrapped up with a few other things. I have started to knit. I spoke to a spiritual medium a few weeks back, and she recommended that I do something creative something creative that was physical, three-dimensional. So not writing and not podcasting per se, but something else. And I couldn't really think of anything that I wanted to do right away, but the idea did seem appealing to me. I've had an urge to tinker over the years, and I never knew exactly what I wanted to tinker with. I used to hear of men, especially working in shops or in their basement on something, and it always seemed appealing to me. But I didn't have woodworking that I wanted to do. I didn't have anything mechanical that I wanted to make or tinker with. So I never really knew what to do with this urge, and I kind of just let it go. But when I heard this, I thought, okay. At first I sort of thought about maybe I could do pottery. There's a pottery studio near me, but I just didn't, the idea of coming home with a cup or a vase didn't seem very appealing. Not something I wanted. And the medium I spoke to said that it should be something that produces something that I want. So I started thinking about clothes, maybe not surprisingly, to the Patty Pod listeners. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I've been looking for a Fair Isle sweater for probably 4 or 5 years now. And I just can't find one with a color scheme that I want. That's really the main thing, is the color scheme. I've looked and I've looked and I've looked and cannot find it. I like violets and purples and blues and kind of reds and little dashes of reds and greens mixed in together, but I really like purple and blue together. And in patterns, not just block color. So for whatever reason, I haven't been able to find that. There's some women's clothing patterns I see every once in a while that's kind of close to what I like, but I can never find them in men's clothing. And I've even gone so far as to look through different fabric websites, because I know that there are certain online companies where you can send them fabric and they'll make you shirts and pants and things. And I thought about doing that, but alas, I could not find a pattern that I wanted, even after scrolling through hundreds of different options. So I thought maybe I'll just knit myself a sweater. That's what I'll do. I'll knit my own Fair Isle sweater. It's a lofty goal. I think to knit just a plain sweater isn't crazy difficult, from what I've heard. And I'll talk about why I've heard that with my knitting in a minute. But from what I've heard, it is doable. So it's a long-term goal. I'm giving myself a lot of time to get there. Right now, I'm just basically knit. I knit, and people. The reason I know that I think the sweater is somewhat doable is many people have stopped and talked to me when they've seen me knit. I'm currently at the Windsor Coffee Shop in Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn. It's right on the border of Kensington, Brooklyn, but it's just on the Windsor Terrace side. So I'm sitting there. It's close to my home. This has become kind of my regular spot. I'm kind of becoming a regular, I should say, at the coffee shop. And I knit here. It's one of the things I do. I work on the podcast. I do some writing. I've been writing a memoir about my spiritual turn, and I've been doing some of that here. And I also started to knit here. So yeah, we'll know where the plaque goes when I do get famous. We'll have to put a plaque right out here, site of the spiritual turn, or whatever I'm going to call the memoir, site of, Patty Pod writings. Let's somebody can go ahead and get that made. That'll just save us time. That would be great. So in any case, I knit here, and when you're knitting in public, people will stop and talk to you. It's kind of a great kind of icebreaker or people meter. Oftentimes they're older middle-aged women or even older women. So young bucks out there, if you guys are, any one of you on the market looking for an older middle-aged lady or even an older lady, think about it. Just that's a free tip. You guys can have that one for free. You youngin' and looking folk. But no, it's actually, I had a kind of an amazing moment of synchronicity in one of these instances. I was knitting on the bench outside the coffee shop where I'm sitting now, and an older woman came out. 3 women came out together. An older woman, she's 86, I believe, and then a woman that was probably about my age. I'm 45, and a woman that was probably in her late 50s. And the 86-year-old was immediately stopped, and she's like, "Oh, are you just learning to knit?" I looked up and I said, "Is it that bad?" You can tell. And she said, no. She immediately realized that it sounded kind of bad and started sort of backtrack, saying something about the way that I was doing it. He was giving some telltale signs or something. But we started talking, and boy, did we just start getting into it, just hit it off, and we started talking about knitting, and I was saying the spiritual medium recommended that I do something like this, that it could be helpful, and she's like, "Oh, it's so therapeutic," and I said, "Yeah, I could see that. I've heard that from other people." And then we started talking about, about culture, and somehow it came up that she was from Saskatchewan, which was crazy because my nephew Liam had just been drafted by a WHL team in Saskatchewan. It's a hockey league. It's actually one of the best hockey leagues in the world for that age. It's called juniors, which is, I think, basically 16 to 20-year-olds, definitely 20 and under. So it was great. It was big news, I think, for him. I was really happy for him, and I've been talking about it with a couple of my friends and family just before I ran into this woman who was from Saskatchewan, and I don't think I've ever met another person in my life from Saskatchewan, let alone, the day after I was talking about Saskatchewan to my friends. So that was the first one. I thought that was kind of crazy. I told her, she knew the team, that he was the Saskatoon Blade, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. She lived in Regina, so she was a Regina Pats fan. NHL star Connor Bedard of the Chicago Blackhawks played for the Pats. That's just a reference if you're wondering who they are. But in any case, so we started talking some more. Somehow we started talking about culture and kind of politics. And I brought up this book that I like that's called American Nations, which makes the case that there's 13 distinct nations in the U.S. And that we should think about sort of cultural and political differences through that lens, rather than the sort of standard regional lens that we do with the Northeast and the Midwest and the South and the West Coast and so on, Mountain West. So this guy makes a pretty compelling case, I think. He's got a lot of documented evidence that certain people pushed westward from the original 13 colonies in the original East Coast, and he can map out, census records and things like that. And then he shows that it lines very closely with how people vote, which is very interesting. And so he's making the case that, these different nations, their values persisted today, and to understand that is to understand the country. Anyways, it's a little bit of a long sidebar. It's a great book. Check it out, American Nations. But I mentioned it, and the 3 women said we were just talking about that book at brunch today. So that was synchronicity number 2, which was crazy that they were talking about that specific book. And then sort of a smaller one was the woman that was my age. I mentioned that I wanted to make a sweater, and she had gone to fashion school, and she can full on make clothes, and she works in the fashion industry, and so that was another one. But what was, I think, the most remarkable to me was when somehow we started talking about spirituality, probably because I just said that I had spoken to a spiritual medium, and just opened up with that one, which is not something I normally do. But then this woman, the older woman, her name is Colleen, and she mentioned that she'd had a near-death experience, which is, those of you probably know, Patty Pie listeners, kind of it was my entry point into spirituality, and something I'm super interested in, and kind of the center of my spirituality is sort of the messages that I've heard from people that have had these near-death experiences. So she told me her story. It was a good one. I'm going to have her on the podcast, so I won't go into it now. But it was like a mother load of synchronicities. I was kind of stressed out during that time with some stuff with work, and so I felt like well timed as these things usually are. So that's what's been going on with me. That's part of why I haven't been doing the podcasts. I've been focusing on this knitting, trying to learn the basics. I have gotten the basics, some of the very basics down. There's two types of stitches. There's the knit stitch and the purl stitch. I can do both. Before you do either stitch, you have to do something called casting on, which is like basically getting yarn onto a needle, and then you do these stitches, and then when you want to finish, you have to do something called casting off, which is to get the yarn off the needle. I can do all four things. I can cast on, I can knit stitch, I can purl stitch, and I can cast off. It's not too hard. But I read that if you want to make a scarf, according to this one program, you need to be able to alternate knit stitching and purl stitching in the same row. And that's proving a little challenging for me. So I've taken a break. I'm going to go to the yarn store where I bought my yarn. They have a woman there who's named Kate, and she's been described by one of the workers or the owner as a master knitter. And he said that she would take a look at what I've done and try to straighten me out, so to speak, untangle my erroneous ways. So we'll see. She was not in the store this weekend. I called up there, so I'm not able to get the guidance I need until next week. So I thought, hey, let's get back to the patty heads. I think my friend Dave's calling himself, and my friend Nate patty heads. You know, they deserve it. They need it. So guys and listeners in general, here we are. We're back in the saddle. What else is going on? Coming up on the end of the school year. It's going to be finals this week. It's going to be, an important week. I think the bulk of the hard work is done. It was kind of leading up to this week, but we got some more to do. Hopefully things go well. What can I say? It's been a difficult transition, but I stuck with it. I'm happy that I did that. I think there's a path forward. I think some of us are just figuring out how to work with each other, and that's what's making it difficult. It's people of goodwill trying to, take our different approaches and make it work. And that's kind of what life's, a lot of life's about. Not all of it, I don't think, but everyone has to deal with that at some point in their life. The different ways of seeing things and approaching things and trying to compromise and cooperate. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the year wrapping up. I'm going to be going back to Minnesota for about 10 days. Maybe I'll see some of the listeners. If I can make that work, I'm going to be up in the Duluth area. If you're going to be up in the Duluth area at the end of June, beginning of July, please let me know. I'd love to see you. I'll see some family. And then Kate and I are heading to the UK in July and August. So we're going to be taking a rather long time, and we're going to see a lot of the UK. I will be posting. So if you're a fan of the travelogue style social media posting that I do when I go on trips, tune in. Mid-July, early August, I'll be doing that. Probably won't talk too much about it here. Kind of like save that for that travelogue, the travelogging as they call it, on the social media. So in any case, that's all coming up. I'm looking forward to it. Let's go over to the language corner. I did have some essay style things I want to do here. We'll go to the language corner. There's a lost saying, I think. I think a lot about lost phrases and sayings. This one is, you make a better door than a window. I used to hear that one as a kid. Kind of a lot. If I was blocking somebody's view, I feel like it was kind of crusty old ladies that would say it to me, or old guys. I would hear from that in Duluth growing up. I never quite understood the whole saying. I understood the first part pretty clearly, that they couldn't see through me, and thus I made a bad window. So, but I didn't really understand how I made a good door. They'd say you make a better door than a window. Like, I didn't swing on hinges. I didn't think. I don't know if there was something about, I don't think, of course it wasn't just said to me, so I don't think humans ever swung on hinges. So I think they're just saying that I think it's just a kind of a scold. And then there's a sort of a lazy attempt at ridicule, because even though the door metaphor doesn't work, they just kind of throw it in there, similar to a window. But I don't know. I don't hear that. Maybe that's why it's lost. Maybe that's why it's gone, because it just wasn't a sharp. It wasn't a sharp kind of put down or scold, and it went the way of the dodo bird, perhaps. Also in the language corner, I want to talk about the word pan. We're going to the UK. We will be going to Stonehenge, which, if you're a self-respecting person of my generation, should bring to mind the movie Spinal Tap, a Christopher Guest movie, which was one that I watched 8 million times in high school with my friend Dan Roman. Shout out Dan Roman, sometimes listener. He's been off the podcast, which I understand. I've gotten off a few myself, but maybe he'll tune in for this one. We watched it 1 trillion times during our extended senior slide. Started sometime, I think, in mid-January of our senior year. Mine started more like mid-March of my sophomore year, but I was precocious like that. So, for those of you who haven't had the good fortune, go check out Spinal Tap right now. It's a mockumentary about a kind of a over-the-top rock band, kind of a hair band. It's amazing. It's an amazing movie. It stands out to today. Anyway, they have a song in the movie. It's supposed to be one of the songs on this fictitious band's album called Stonehenge, and I won't give it away, but there's a funny scene when they perform it. But they have a lyric that goes, "And the children dance to the pipes of Pan, bum, bum," and it goes on like that, and. So I looked up the word because I couldn't quite remember what the pipes of Pan were, or who Pan was. And according to Google's AI overview, which of course is now the truth, with a capital T, the word can refer to, quote, a cooking utensil, of course, the pan, that we all use and know and love, a Greek god, that must be the pipes of Pan, the Greek god, a sexual orientation, a computer network, a moon of Saturn, and more. Now, just reading that, I just thought, what range and what a spectacular mix of meanings for this one word. I find all those things to be quite lovely in their own way. I mean, you've got sex in there, so enough said. You've got a cooking pan, which makes me think of delicious cheeseburgers. I still get to eat cheeseburgers thanks to the advent of Beyond Beef and Impossible patties. So even though I'm a vegetarian, I still love a good cheeseburger. I timed that well. Thank you, strange food scientists, for making those. Or cool food scientists, I should say. The computer networks, I entertain myself in such a variety of ways via computer networks. And a Greek god, that seems like seems like a convivial creature, or I think it is. Pan, if I remember correctly. Fun-loving, maybe mischievous. I'd have to look more into that. And then the moon of Saturn. It was also a moon of Saturn. I take a pretty romantic view of any moon, a la the late 90s era Smashing Pumpkins, with their Renaissance via Victorian nightscape aesthetic. Think about the cover of Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, if you're wondering what I'm talking about. The music video to, what was that song? Tonight Tonight. What a beautiful song. Beautiful video. I was absolutely in love with the whole sound and the aesthetic at that time. Anyway, so I love the moon. That's my view of the moon. And Pan can also mean all, as in the Pan American Games, which used to be a thing, right? Or Pan Am Airlines. So the word is nearly pan delightful in my mind. There you go. How do you like that? Okay. I was also thinking about old songs recently. I was just in my bike room cleaning and oiling the chain on my bike. It was kind of a New York City moment. We don't have our own basements or garages here, many of us apartment dwellers. So if you have to do any kind of maintenance or hardware or working on anything, you got to find kind of creative ways to do it. I see people working on cars in the street sometimes, which I think is nuts, like underneath their car. Maybe they're just changing oil or whatever, but I'm like, Jesus, if you get hit, it seems kind of crazy. I suppose you have to do it though if you don't have, if you don't want to pay big bucks or whatever, and if you have the aptitude, it would be sort of silly to take it to the shop, but you may not have a place to do it. In any case, I don't have that problem. I do have the e-bike. I think I've told listeners about the e-bike. It's been great. I've been zipping all over Brooklyn. You can get to so many places more quickly than the subway. I haven't been on the subway much. I've also been taking it to hockey in Manhattan and just going on rides. I love it. I understand the motorcycle experience. Mine goes to 28 miles an hour, which is fast enough. And it's easier than a motorcycle, much easier. So I can just put it in my bike room. But, the bike room's not huge. And it's got these panels on it. It's a big e-bike. It's called a cargo bike. It's got a big, long rack on the back with these like running board things that you can put your feet on. And you can sit on the back. There's a seat that I can take on and off. So Kate will go on the back, and but they have these panels along the back rack where you have to take them off in order to oil the chain and like oil the whatever that thing is called, the sprocket, wherever the chain wraps around, that spiky wheel thing. Don't I sound like a bike tech or an engineer? In any case, I kind of have a running joke with some of my more mechanically inclined friends about how mechanically disinclined I am. But out here in Brooklyn, actually, especially amongst my wife's family, I'm like the handyman. It's kind of just all relative, I guess. But so I have to take this panel off, so I have to move it. I had to kind of like move it to the back of the room so I wasn't in anybody's way. And in any case, there I am taking the panel off, oiling the chain, wiping it down. And I got my phone playing, just YouTube music, like generating playlists for me. And they were playing 80s songs. It was Everybody Wants to Rule the World was the one that really kind of brought me back with that little intro. That wasn't the best recreation of it, but I think you know it maybe, or you can pull it up. And it just instantly brought me back to my childhood and like a mood, kind of a sense that everything's good, like I had very much in my childhood, that everything was, nothing to worry about. And so then there were certainly moments like that in my childhood. It wasn't all perfect by any means, but it was pretty stable, as many childhoods are, and you just don't have adult concerns. And it was great. It was just this little moment. Old songs can do that. They can bring us back to these places in our life to spark a mood that I haven't felt in such a long time is rather remarkable, rather magical, the magical power of nostalgia and old songs. Speaking of old songs, the other day I was watching a video of hit songs from 1985. It also brought about this nostalgia for feelings of safety and peacefulness that I had as a child. And it was somewhat ironic because many of the themes and visuals in the videos involved really charged topics like war violence. It reminded me of a time when I went to the microfilm or microfiche section in my library in college. I was working on some project, and I found something from 10 or more years prior to that time as I was looking through. And I was struck by the newspaper articles I was looking at and the great concern they had for whatever issues it was that didn't matter at the time that I was researching. It was a very striking realization that our society, especially the more literate parts of it, could really get worked up a lot by things that turned out to be not problems at all. Now, some may say that some of those matters didn't become problems because of the attention paid to them. Some of that certainly may be true. However, it seems to me that much of it was sheer paranoia. For example, I remember my 6th grade teacher and the broader society in 1992 in America being borderline terrified of Japanese businesses taking over the world. There was a Newsweek magazine cover entitled Japan Inc., which talked about how Japan's government was so tightly bound to and supportive of their technological corporations that their economy was booming. The fear was that we couldn't compete with such a unified culture and their governmental/corporate partnership. This was just after the fall of communism and became for a while a major concern for American foreign policy. Japan, not long after, went into a rather lengthy decline economically, and some blame their lack of innovation, their groupthink, on the uniformity that had settled in with this kind of corporate governmental partnership. So that was one of those moments. Did we do anything? Not really. I don't think America did anything to address this concern. We couldn't. Japan was running their own affairs. They could do what they want. We couldn't. Obviously there's certain foreign relation things that you can do, obviously, what we're seeing now, but America didn't, institute massive tariffs or anything like that. We just sort of watched and were very worried about it. And, it came to not be this great concern. There was other concerns about Japan that were mixed in at the time. I remember my 6th grade teacher also telling us that, Japanese kids did math for 8 hours a day or something like that. I went to school from 4 in the morning until 8 at night and all this kind of stuff. And, I remember hearing a lot of that kind of stuff from other adults too. They've been struggling as, their economy's been not super strong in their, developed nation and all of that. But they also have population issues right now. So it's just, my larger point is that when you zoom out, if you look back, you can see that the things that we think are so overwhelming today in the news and in the larger society, can turn. And I'm not trying to diminish the real problems. Obviously, there are right now, and there's some real, in particular cases that we all know of, some really horrific things happening. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to immediately alleviate all that. We should, but at the same time, it can if you just glue yourself to the news and glue yourself to the concerns of the day, it can seem like it's just a never-ending crisis, I think. So, a little bit about perspective. Speaking of spirituality, I thought about the gift of imagination, how the imagination is such a gift, such a sort of spiritual power that we have. Obviously, it has some reality, as the mind, or at least brain activity, has reality. I think even the most hardcore scientific materialists would grant me that. I think the problem is that there's a lot of negative emotion that accompanies our idea of imagination, and it's presumed lack of reality, that something is just imagination. But I think that our idea that it is unimportant, I think that accompanies our idea that it's unimportant, impractical, and just fluff. I actually believe it's really powerfully important. I think it's part of the life of the mind, and that is where most of us spend most of our time, I would argue. Most of our conscious experience is thinking about things, planning for the future, considering different nuances or features or aspects of our work or our relationships or our hobbies or our fortunes or our health. These things are often about, we're living in our mind. We're not thinking about the step that we're taking as we're walking down the street, or the feel of our clothing on our body. And so, your imagination's a big part of your life, of your mind, and you're spending a lot of your life in your mind. So I think that, it's also, it's a big part of a lived experience. And it's also a place where we can go in our imagination and spend time there and daydream, something that's also kind of greatly frowned upon, daydreaming. This is nothing to say, of the practical value of the imagination, to think of ideas, of course, to think of new songs, to think of new stories, to think of new inventions, to think of new plans, maybe for socializing or something seemingly maybe less serious. But, people have made mention of that, I think, for years, about the sort of the practical value, because anything created has been imagined before it's been created. But I'm trying to make a case even for the non-practical gifts of the imagination, where it's just a place where you can go, especially if maybe you're not like super engaged with wherever you are physically. You can go into your imagination and daydream, and can take you to a different place. Since we're on spirituality, I'll just say a little bit more. I've been thinking about returning to the ego after reining it in for decades, especially the adult ones. I think I need to not be afraid of violating principles such as those that see all of us as drops in the ocean, or the ones that warn of comparing ourselves to others. I haven't fully flipped the switch back to going full throttle every day, sort of like full throttle after some kind of goal, like I did maybe in my early 20s. But I'm getting the feeling that I need to reflect less on embracing the ego and instead actually doing it. It goes against a lot of my sort of spiritual reflexes, but I believe this is part of course correcting, and that many empathic people and spiritual people also could benefit from it. Certain people, I think, don't need to. I think the message about reining in the ego is needed, especially with certain politicians and other leaders in business and other leaders in their society that can get so directed by their ego. And I know it's been a problem with people that have had maybe addiction issues and other issues, and I understand that. I've had problems where I've had kind of like an over-identification with the ego, but you hear that so much in spiritual circles, and I think there are some people that actually, the type that are often concerned about spirituality and about the wider world, actually could use a little more swag, believing in themselves, which I've experienced in the world of athletics. You get more of that message, and I think can be helpful for people that maybe aren't as exposed to that as I have been. So I think I wish I could just live my life buoyed by the love of my family and friends, and I'm grateful for many of those, for much of that love that I do have. But I'm also at a place where I want to kind of have some swagger in my life, and my inner hockey player wants to still move beautifully through life and make spectacular plays. Okay, we're going to finish up here. It's getting to be about the half an hour mark. I want to talk about how I'm okay with guilty pleasures. I'm loath to call any pleasure guilty, but I will categorize two of mine as such: air guitar and air conducting. I can't decide which one is cheesier. I think the air guitar is probably cheesier per se, but the dorkiness factor on the air conducting, it's so off the charts that it might be worse. I sing lightly walking around town and even on the train, and I've pretty much learned to not be bothered by the little looks I sometimes get from doing that. But I cannot honestly say that I can just ignore the stares engendered by my occasional lapse into air guitar or air conducting. So they're pleasures, and I will keep indulging in them, but I will feel a little bit guilty. All right, that's the Patty Pod for Season 3, Episode 10. Do have a couple of interviews lined up, working on scheduling. I had some delays with my guests. They just weren't able to get to it for various reasons. But we got 3 lined up. This was the old-fashioned smorgasbord style, where we just mix it up. I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope everyone's doing well, and I hope to see some of you soon. Those of you that I am able to connect with in person. Till then, peace and love.